What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports here on the SEC channel at the voice of college football. It's time for our Week 7 power rankings in the SEC. We saw a lot of movement this past weekend. Some surprises, of course, Texas A&M beating Alabama being one of the biggest, probably the biggest surprise of the entire season so far in the SEC, as that was just a huge upset. And you're going to see the reflection of that upset here in the power rankings. And keep in mind that the power rankings are a little different than, say, a top 25 ranking, because when you do these power rankings, you're putting a little bit more emphasis on the way the teams are playing right now. So you're looking at the last game or the last couple of games a little bit more than the entire season, not necessarily as much about the resume, but just how the teams are playing. And in my opinion, that's how you should rank teams when you're doing power rankings. So let's get right into it. Starting at the bottom, we've got Vanderbilt at number 14, Missouri at 13, South Carolina at 12. I think it's pretty clear that those are the three bottom teams. Missouri, South Carolina, I think you can make an argument to flip those two. Maybe Missouri should be ahead of South Carolina, but South Carolina was a little bit more competitive against Tennessee, didn't give up as many points, so that's why I put the Gamecocks ahead of Missouri. And then LSU at number 11, a team that is falling fast. They lose again, this time in what was really a blowout to Kentucky. Now, Kentucky's the real deal. Kentucky's a good football team, but I really expected LSU to be competitive in that game. They really were not at all. Kentucky controlled it from start to finish, and all of a sudden LSU finds themselves at 3-3, a team that I thought had a chance to maybe be that team to knock off Alabama in the West this year. It has not worked out that way. LSU just can't run the football. The defense is not great. And this team's just not very good. Let's just put it that way. They're just not very good, and they drop all the way down to number 11 in the power rankings. Moving on to 9 and 10, I've paired these two teams up, Mississippi State and Tennessee. Tennessee's got that offense rolling right now. Back-to-back big wins, Missouri and South Carolina. Tennessee looking like a team that might just make it to a bowl game this year. Might be better than that. We'll see if they can knock off some of the better teams. Some very tough tests still ahead of them, obviously. But the Vols come in at number 10 after beating South Carolina. They don't jump way up in these rankings or anything, because keep in mind the two teams they just beat are at the bottom, South Carolina and Missouri. But still, you got to like what you're seeing from this Tennessee team, especially this Tennessee offense. Hendon Hooker doing a great job there, taking over at quarterback. And then Mississippi State at number 9, they are 3-2, coming off of a big win against Texas A&M. And because of that, you almost want to put them higher, but they did lose to LSU the week before in a game where they were down pretty bad. They had to come from behind just to make that interesting late. They didn't play this past Saturday, so it's kind of hard to get a feel for this team and where they should be in these rankings. We'll find out a little bit more about them on Saturday when they play Alabama. If they're competitive in that game, or maybe even pull off an upset, then of course they're going to move up in these rankings. But they're not, and it's going to be a tough one because you're playing an Alabama team coming off of a loss. They're going to be angry. But I don't know, just because you lose to Alabama, that you'd see this team really drop. That'll be interesting to see how both teams come out and play on Saturday. And then we kind of put these next three teams together, 6, 7, and 8. Texas A&M, Auburn, and Arkansas. Was trying to figure out the best order to rank these teams. In my top 25 rankings, I had Arkansas ahead of Texas A&M because they beat them head-to-head. And if you're looking at the entire season, you're looking at the resumes and all of that, Arkansas should be ranked ahead of Texas A&M. But these are the power rankings, and we're talking about how these teams are playing right now. Arkansas has lost 2 games in a row. They just lost to Ole Miss. Before that, of course, losing to Georgia in a game where they couldn't score a single point. Auburn a little bit more competitive against Georgia. That's why I've got Auburn ahead of Arkansas. But Texas A&M all the way up to number 6 after a big win over Alabama. If they can play like that the rest of the season, Texas A&M becomes a team that if Alabama slips up somewhere along the way, Texas A&M could possibly even make it to the SEC championship. The question is going to be, which Texas A&M team will we see moving forward? Will we see the team that we just saw against Alabama? Because if we do, it seems really good. If we don't, then they're probably going to lose a couple more games. So that'll be interesting to see again if Texas A&M can keep that momentum going, or do they kind of fall back off to how they were playing before that Alabama game? Was it just one game where they just played the game of their lives, or can they do that the rest of the year? Texas A&M, though, all the way back up to number 6. Remember, they were towards the top at the beginning, then dropped way down after losing a couple of tough ones. Now jumping back up to number 6 after knocking off the Crimson Tide. Into the top 5 now, we go with Florida at number 5. Coming off of an easy win over Vanderbilt. They did what we expected them to do. No real surprise there, but the Gators still in pretty good position. Losing to two of the top teams in the SEC, Alabama and Kentucky. They're going to have some help, though. They're going to have to not only win out, beat Georgia, but they're going to need someone else to knock off Georgia if they're going to win the East. And they really don't want it to be Kentucky, because Kentucky is sitting there in a position where if they beat Georgia, then they can still lose another game, and they're going to the SEC championship. I mean, that's the position they put themselves in, and they've got a great shot if they can beat Georgia. Now, they lose that game, and then Florida beats Georgia, then it's probably going to be a tiebreaker, Georgia and Kentucky, if Kentucky wins out. But anyways, Florida there at number 5. They have a big test against LSU coming up on Saturday. Number 4 is Ole Miss. Ole Miss at 4-1. They bounced back to beat Arkansas in one of the best games of the year, I would say, so far. A 2-point conversion away from losing that game, but they got the stop when they had to. Defense didn't play well at all in this game, but the offense played really well. And I still believe that Ole Miss has the best offense in the SEC. I know against Alabama they didn't have a great game. I still go back to that game and say, especially now that we've seen Alabama lose to Texas A&M, if Ole Miss had just played that traditionally and not gone for it on 4th down in their own territory so many times, would they have had a chance to make that game interesting and make that a close game? I think it's possible. I really do, especially when we see what happened with Alabama and Texas A&M. I think Ole Miss just gave them those short fields and just basically handed the game over to Alabama. Now, give Alabama credit for making those stops. They definitely earned the credit there, but that's a tough one now if you're Ole Miss. Not necessarily that you would have won that game, but it at least could have been competitive if they had just played it straight up, not gone for it on 4th down in their own territory. But the Rebels here at number 4, still looking good. Number 3 is Alabama. So if you notice if you watch my main channel and you see my rankings, I had Alabama still ahead of Kentucky. But if we're talking about power rankings, we're talking about what has happened recently. Alabama did not look good against Texas A&M. This just didn't look like a good team. Now, you do have to still give them credit for the way they played in those other games. But Kentucky's playing better than Alabama right now. If they played like they played this past Saturday against each other, Kentucky wins that game. Kentucky is for real this year. They're at number 2 in the power rankings because they're getting it done on defense. They're running the football like they always do, and they're throwing the football. They're balanced on offense. It's something that they've been lacking, but now, give Mark Stoops so much credit for finally getting this offense going out and making some great hires, and he's just a great coach. That's what it comes down to. He is a great coach, and he's got Kentucky in a position to where if they can win this Saturday, they are in the driver's seat to go to the SEC championship. Now, winning that game is obviously going to be really tough. Georgia's still the number 1 team in our power rankings, the best defense in the country, an offense that is underrated. I've been saying that. I will say, though, that we saw a little bit of a weakness, or not a weakness. We saw an opening to where you can move the ball on Georgia if you can throw the football. The thing is, I don't know who's going to really throw on them in the SEC. If they played Ole Miss, that could be an interesting matchup there. If maybe they get to the college football playoff and play a team like Ohio State, that could be an area where you're a little bit concerned if you're a Georgia fan. But even their defense giving up some plays through the in the passing game, even with that, their defense is still the best defense in the country. So maybe they're not as dominant as we thought, where they're going to shut every team out and win all of these games without giving up any points except in garbage time. Maybe they're not that good, but they're still really good, and they're still the best defense in the SEC. They can run the football. We saw when you take away the run, when you load up the box, they can make big plays through the air. And that's, again, why I think this offense is underrated, because if you do try to just load up and stop that run game, they are capable of throwing the football, even with Stetson Bennett at quarterback, and making some big plays through the air. And because of that, this is the best team in the SEC, the best team in the country, and probably the favorites to win it all right now, the Georgia Bulldogs there at number 1. So that's how I'm ranking the teams here heading into week 7. What do you guys think? Give me your comments down below and let me know how you would rank the teams in the SEC. Give me your power rankings heading into week 7. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on our SEC football channel.